Leaving is often mistaken for erasure, as though distance could undo what has already been inscribed within another human being. When you step out of someone's life, you remove your physical presence, the sound of your voice, the familiarity of your gestures, the shared rhythm of daily interaction. Yet the psyche does not function according to physical laws. It does not measure absence in miles or silence in days. What has been experienced, especially on an emotional level, does not simply dissolve when contact is broken. Instead, it shifts its domain. Your presence, once external, becomes internalized. It takes on a different form, less visible, yet more deeply rooted. The other person no longer interacts with you directly, but they continue to interact with the imprint you left behind. This imprint is not a perfect reflection of who you were. It is shaped by their perception, their emotional state, and the meanings they attach to your existence. In this way, you continue to exist within them, not as a living person, but as a psychological structure. Moments that once involved you begin to echo in your absence. A place, a song, a phrase, these become triggers that reactivate your presence within their inner world. The mind replays fragments, not out of choice, but because it is attempting to process what remains unresolved. Even in stillness, there are movements beneath the surface. Thoughts arise unexpectedly, emotions surface without clear cause, and your image appears where it was not consciously invited. This persistence reveals something essential about human experience. Connection alters the inner landscape. Once changed, it cannot simply return to its previous state. The departure of a person does not reverse the transformation they initiated. Instead, it leaves behind a tension between what was experienced and what is now absent. That tension becomes a source of psychological activity, often operating outside of conscious awareness. The individual may attempt to move on, to replace, to distract, or to suppress. Yet suppression does not eliminate presence, it relocates it. What is pushed out of awareness settles into deeper layers of the psyche, where it continues to influence thoughts, emotions, and behaviors in indirect ways. You may no longer be visible in their life, but you remain active in shaping their responses, their expectations, and even their sense of self. Your absence, therefore, is not an emptiness but a transformation of presence. It is a shift from being someone they encounter in the external world to being something they carry within. The interaction has not ended, it has merely changed its form. A memory is rarely a faithful preservation of reality. It does not store a person as they were in their full complexity, with all their contradictions, subtleties, and changing states. Instead, the mind distills experience into something more concentrated, more symbolic. When you became part of their inner world, you ceased to exist as a complete individual and were reshaped into a representation, an idea that carries emotional weight rather than objective truth. This transformation is not deliberate. It happens quietly, beneath conscious awareness, as the psyche attempts to organize experience into something meaningful. Certain aspects of you are emphasized, others are forgotten, and some are altered entirely. What remains is not you as a person, but what you came to signify. You might represent longing, or loss, or a moment of awakening. You might embody a possibility they once believed in, or a fear they could not articulate. In this symbolic form, you become more potent than you were in reality. A real person can be questioned, confronted, understood over time. A symbol, however, resists such clarity. It is fluid, capable of appearing in different forms across different moments. It can shift, depending on their emotional state, taking on new meanings without ever fully resolving into something concrete. This is why your presence continues even in your absence, because symbols are not bound by time or physical interaction. Within their inner world, you may appear not as a fixed image, but as a recurring theme. You emerge in their thoughts when they encounter something that resonates with what you once represented. A feeling of familiarity, a sudden sense of absence, an unexplained emotional response, these are not direct memories, but symbolic activations. They are the psyche's way of revisiting what you came to mean, rather than who you actually were. In this way, you are no longer limited by your real actions or intentions. The symbol of you can grow beyond the boundaries of reality, becoming idealized or distorted. You may be remembered as better than you were, or worse, depending on what the psyche needs to process. The truth of who you were becomes secondary to the role you play within their psychological narrative. This symbolic existence also makes you more difficult to release. A real person can be let go of through understanding and acceptance. A symbol, however, is tied to deeper layers of meaning that often remain unconscious. To let go of the symbol would require confronting what it represents, and that is rarely a simple task. So you persist, not as a memory that fades with time, but as a living idea within their inner world, continuously reshaped, continuously reinterpreted, carrying a significance that extends far beyond the reality of your presence. Emotions do not disappear simply because the circumstances that gave rise to them have changed. When something remains unresolved, it does not fade into silence. It continues to exist in a suspended state, seeking recognition, seeking completion. Your absence may have removed the immediate source of their emotional experience, but it did not resolve what was felt. Instead, those emotions remain active beneath the surface, shaping their inner world in ways they may not fully understand. Unresolved emotions possess a certain persistence. They do not obey the will of the conscious mind, which might attempt to dismiss or suppress them. Instead, they move through indirect paths, resurfacing at unexpected moments. A seemingly insignificant event can trigger a disproportionate response, not because of the present situation, but because it resonates with something that was left unfinished. In these moments, you are not remembered as a clear thought, but as a feeling that returns without explanation. This is how you remain alive within them, not as a constant awareness, but as a recurring emotional presence. The mind may not consciously think of you, yet the body reacts, the mood shifts, the inner atmosphere changes. These reactions are echoes of what was never fully processed. They are expressions of a deeper layer of the psyche, attempting to bring attention to what has been avoided or left incomplete. The nature of unresolved emotion is that it seeks movement. It does not remain static, it evolves, intensifies, or transforms depending on how it is handled. If ignored, it often deepens, embedding itself further into the unconscious. If confronted, it begins to reveal its structure, its origin, and its meaning. But until that confrontation occurs, it continues to operate in the background, influencing thoughts, decisions, and perceptions. You become intertwined with these emotions, not because you are physically present, but because you are part of their formation. The feelings they experienced in connection with you, whether attachment, loss, confusion, or desire, are now linked to your image within their psyche. When those emotions resurface, they carry your presence with them, even if your name is not consciously invoked. There is also a tendency for the mind to circle around what it cannot resolve. It revisits fragments, replays scenarios, imagines alternative outcomes, all in an attempt to achieve closure. Yet this repetition rarely leads to resolution on its own. Instead, it reinforces the emotional charge, keeping the experience alive within the psyche. The more it is revisited without understanding, the more deeply it becomes embedded. In this way, your absence does not signify an end, but a continuation on a different level. The emotional connection persists, not as a living interaction, but as an internal process that remains unfinished, active, and influential within the deeper layers of their being. What remains most powerful is rarely the factual reality of who you were as a person, but the internal shift you initiated within them. A human being can encounter countless individuals, yet only a few leave behind a psychological disturbance strong enough to alter perception, emotion, or identity. Your significance is not preserved in the details of your personality, your habits, or your intentions, but in the effect you had on their inner world. When you entered their life, you did not arrive in isolation. You interacted with what already existed within them, their hidden desires, their unspoken fears, their dormant potentials. Something in you resonated with something in them, and that resonance created movement. It brought to the surface elements of their psyche that may have been inactive, unnoticed, or deliberately suppressed. In this way, your presence acted less as an independent force and more as a catalyst. A catalyst does not define the reaction, but it enables it. What emerged within them was not something you created from nothing. It was something that already existed, waiting for the right condition to appear. You may have awakened a longing they had never consciously acknowledged, or exposed a vulnerability they had carefully protected. You may have given shape to an idea of connection, intimacy, or possibility that previously existed only in abstract form. Because of this, their attachment is not solely directed toward you as an individual, it is directed toward the experience you made possible. The feelings that arose, intensity, confusion, excitement, or even pain, become intertwined with your image, but they originate from within their own psyche. This makes your influence more enduring because it is rooted in something that belongs to them, not something external that can simply be removed. Over time, the mind may struggle to separate who you were from what you evoked. The two become fused, creating a perception that your value lies in your identity, when in fact it lies in the transformation you triggered. Even if they were to encounter someone else with similar qualities, the experience would not be identical, because it is not the qualities themselves that matter, but the specific interaction between those qualities and their inner world at that moment in time. This is why your absence does not diminish your impact. The awakening has already occurred. The shift in perception has already taken place. They cannot return to the state they were in before encountering you, because something has been revealed to them, something about their own emotional depth, their capacity for connection, or their internal contradictions. You remain significant, not because of what you did, but because of what began within them when you were there, and what continues to unfold long after you are gone. There are elements of experience that the conscious mind cannot fully accept, not because they are insignificant, but because they are too complex, too contradictory, or too unsettling to be easily understood. When such experiences occur, they are not discarded, they are displaced. The psyche moves them out of immediate awareness and into deeper layers, where they remain active in a different form. This movement is not a failure of the mind, but a function of its structure. What cannot be processed consciously does not lose its energy, it retains its intensity, but operates beyond direct observation. In this hidden domain, it begins to organize itself in ways that are less logical and more symbolic. It attaches itself to images, to feelings, to patterns of behavior. It waits for moments when the barrier between the conscious and the unconscious becomes thinner, through dreams, through emotional vulnerability, through repetition of certain life situations. Your presence becomes embedded in this process. If the experience involving you was not fully understood or resolved, it does not remain as a clear narrative that can be easily recalled and dismissed. Instead, it becomes fragmented, existing in pieces that are scattered throughout the psyche. One part may exist as a memory, another as an emotion, another as a recurring pattern of thought or reaction. These fragments do not always appear together, but they are connected beneath the surface. The unconscious does not forget in the way the conscious mind does. It preserves, but not in a static form. It reshapes what it holds, combining it with other experiences, linking it to broader themes within the individual's inner life. In this way, your influence extends beyond the original context in which it was formed. It becomes part of a larger psychological structure, contributing to how they interpret new experiences and respond to future relationships. Because this process occurs outside of awareness, it often feels as though the reactions it produces have no clear origin. A person may find themselves drawn to certain situations or repelled by others without understanding why. They may repeat patterns that seem irrational or self-defeating. These are not random occurrences, but expressions of something that has not yet been brought into conscious understanding. Your absence does not remove this influence, because the process sustaining it is internal. Even if they no longer think of you directly, the patterns shaped by your presence continue to operate. The unconscious integrates your imprint into its ongoing activity, allowing it to persist in subtle but powerful ways. To confront this would require bringing what is hidden into awareness, recognizing the connections between past experience and present reaction. Until that happens, what was once lived externally continues to live internally, shaping perception and behavior without revealing its full structure to the conscious mind. What remains unresolved does not simply wait in silence, it exerts pressure. It seeks expression, not always in direct or recognizable ways, but through tension, contradiction, and inner conflict. When you became part of their psychological experience without reaching a point of understanding or closure, you did not settle into a quiet memory. You became a question, one that continues to demand attention without offering an immediate answer. This question is not always consciously formed. It does not appear as a clear thought that can be easily articulated. Instead, it manifests as a sense of incompleteness, as though something essential was left unfinished. They may feel drawn back toward what is no longer present, not because they desire the reality of it, but because they seek resolution for what remains open within them. Inner conflict emerges when opposing forces coexist without reconciliation. Part of them may attempt to move forward, to detach, to construct a narrative that explains your absence in a way that allows them to continue. Yet another part resists this movement, holding on to fragments of experience that have not been fully processed. These opposing tendencies create tension, and that tension becomes a defining feature of their inner state. You are woven into this conflict, not as a fixed memory, but as a central point around which these opposing forces revolve. One aspect of their psyche may idealize what was, preserving it as something meaningful or irreplaceable. Another may reject it, framing it as something that needed to end. Neither position fully resolves the experience, because both are attempts to impose clarity on something that remains internally divided. This division often expresses itself through repetition. They may revisit similar emotional situations, encounter people who evoke comparable feelings, or find themselves reacting in ways that echo past experiences. These repetitions are not coincidences. They are attempts by the psyche to recreate the conditions necessary for resolution. The unresolved question seeks an answer, and until it finds one, it continues to reappear in different forms. At times, this can create a sense of being trapped between past and present. They are no longer where they once were, yet they are not entirely free from it. The experience has not been fully integrated into their understanding of themselves. It exists as something separate, something that interrupts rather than aligns with their sense of continuity. You persist within this unresolved space, not as a clear figure, but as a source of disturbance that shapes their inner dialogue. You are present in the contradictions they cannot reconcile, in the questions they cannot fully answer, in the emotional responses that seem disproportionate to the present moment. Your role is no longer that of a participant in their life, but of an unresolved element within their psyche, continuing to influence the way they think, feel, and respond, without ever fully revealing itself in a complete and coherent form.